Hi, my name is Rico Sainer, and over the course of the next couple months, I will attempt to establish a board gaming company while also designing my first board game. So I thought this would be a good experiment. I'm going to call it an experiment, and I'll talk about it a little bit later. But I think this would be good for one, to help someone that's also thinking about creating a board game or also like possibly establishing a board gaming company. Now, I'm not the first person that's ever done this, and I likely won't be the last. So off the page, I know that they did a series previously, probably about 3 years ago. I'll put a link to the playlist above, but very super helpful. And hopefully with that, in addition to a lot of other resources out there and all the mistakes that I'm going to make along the way, because there will be mistakes, hopefully you can learn from myself as well as a lot of the other content that already exists. But that's not the only reason why I'm doing this. I'll be honest, I think it's good marketing as well. And I think we're at that day and age where you have to have some sort of level of marketing for a game to be successful. There's just so much out there. But even that's probably not the most significant reason why I'm doing this. So I have been about 85% with this board game that I have designed, Escaping Reality, for probably about a year now. And I really need a mechanism to hold me accountable. So 2025 is the start of 2025. New year, new me. And I think I've come to the conclusion that if I don't bite the bullet now and just do this, then I'm probably never going to do it. So this is just a way for me to hold myself accountable. Now, with that being said, I do have several concerns, and there are some things that leading up into this point that I've struggled with. And maybe it's fears. I don't know the best way to categorize this, but I just want to be honest with everyone up front. So this game, I designed it, and a lot of the artworks that I've used, pretty much all of it has been AI generated. And I know, don't turn me off, don't try to pin me to a wall, but I know that using AI art in board games and just in general is very polarizing, right? You're either one of two mindsets. You either hate it or you're indifferent. For me, obviously, I've incorporated it into my board games, so I think that I probably have a different viewpoint than others. That is not the intent of this video, is to persuade you one way or the other. Rather, I just want to be honest with people. I want to be as transparent as possible. I don't think this experiment works if I'm not honest with people and I'm not transparent about where I'm at currently, where I'm going, the future. But even that's probably not the major concern I have. I think that putting yourself out there is scary. And for me, I think that that's probably one of the biggest things, is putting myself out there is scary. But you couple that with the possibility of failure, and I think that that's where I've really been struggling up until this point, because I do think that I have a solid foundation. I think I have a very solid game. And I'll talk about that a little bit later. But to document that, or even to attempt something and fail, I think it's scary. So for me, at the end result, I just got to figure this out. So hopefully it doesn't end in failure, but if it does, it should be a learning experience for myself, and hopefully someone else can learn something from my mistakes. I know that, you can't succeed without failure, but I putting yourself out there and even talking to the camera right now, this isn't natural, right? There's no one on the other side of this camera that's, helping me. It's not a back and forth conversation. This is one way. So with that being said, I just want to kind of talk briefly about myself, kind of introduce myself, kind of give you my background, my gaming experience over the last few years, where I'm at, where I've been. So starting out, I think I'm going to talk professionally. So from a professional perspective, I have been an analyst in various capacities for the past 15 years. I do think that skill set transitions very well into board game design, and also just playing board games and just gaming in general. I think that you have to be able to challenge ideas. You have to be able to evaluate different things. And I don't think analytical capability is just unique to being an analyst, right? Everyone does it on a day-to-day. And I would argue that if you're in the gaming, board game community, or you just play games in general, you probably analyze things fairly often. And I think in the day-to-day, we also analyze things all the time. But I do think that over the past 15 years, I've been able to use that to really challenge ideas and really kind of figure out like the best way of doing things. I think it translates very well into the board game design aspect. From a hobby perspective, so I have been playing games in various capacities really throughout my entire life. So growing up, I played board games, but it wasn't really probably up until about 8 years ago that I really started getting invested in the board games. So for me, it kind of started. I have a really good friend of mine. We were coworkers at the time. We had just in the office, we're just talking, and then we got on the subject of board games. And I mentioned like I love board games, he loved board games, but like we at that time we hadn't really played anything besides like Monopoly, Catan, like those type of things. So like we set up a board gaming night. Again, my wife, him and I, and this was about 80 years ago. And so he showed up with Yahtzee. I think at the time I might have bought an Exploding Kittens. And then I can't remember what other game, but anyway, very basic games, I would say. And then from there, man, we had such a great time that night that the next weekend we ended up doing it again. And then the week after that, we did it again. Next thing you know, I'm like researching games. I'm trying to figure it out. The next game I think that we had gotten was Ticket to Ride. And I think Ticket to Ride for me was like the first like experience where I was like, there's something else out here. This is very interesting. And I still love Ticket to Ride today. But from there, I ended up picking up Scythe. And I think that was really minus like the Ticket to Ride set kind of the foundation. I think Scythe was really the first game where like it just like opened the board gaming world to me. I remember sitting in bed reading that rule book I read it for a week straight. I watched videos because like we were doing back to back every weekend. We were doing board game night, and I remember just reading that, and getting ready, and just getting excited. And then I taught it and we played it, and it was just such an experience. And that kind of sets the foundation. I'll actually put a picture up somewhere. I don't know. Maybe I'll put it up right here of like my current board game. I guess in the library, for lack of a better word. But I feel like I'm adding a board game every month or 2 months. I'm adding a couple board games, but it just keeps growing. And I don't think I'm as bad as some people, but I'm getting there. But so from there, my interest kind of grew. And I think for the most part, we're more interested in Euro style games, worker placement, some sort of card drafting, like engine building type thing. That's kind of been where the majority of, I think, our games that we play, our interests kind of lie. But me, I'm kind of weird because like I also probably around 6 or 7 years ago, my buddy also got me into Warhammer. So I'm kind of also like a good crunchy wargamey game, roll some dice, read rules. But I've found that over the years, the complexity of those skirmish type games, they're like a hobby in and of themselves. And you take out the painting, the building, the models, and all these other aspects. Just the game mechanics in and of themselves is a huge hurdle to overcome. And I started kind of getting fatigued of that, but I don't know, maybe I'll put up a couple pictures like some things that I've painted in the past, but I was real heavy into painting and that hobby. So like for me, I kind of like straddle the line between both of these kind of things. And I think it kind of bleeds into like the board game design, which is escaping reality. I haven't really talked about it much up to this point, but the intent in this video is really not to really talk about the board game itself that much. I think that over the next few weeks, I plan on doing a video, hopefully every week, where I just talk about something that I've done that week, what I've learned, kind of set up some milestones for me to like talk about each week, maybe some game design design lab type stuff, where I'm going, where I've been. So I guess from there, I'm going to transition and kind of talk about the game itself, escaping reality. So when I first started thinking about, I started thinking about designing a game probably about 2 years ago. And in my mind, when I first started thinking about it, there were some things that I was very interested in from like a mechanism perspective that like, if I could figure out how to balance it, I thought it would work very well. And not to toot my own horn, but I think that everything I've done up to this point has been very solid, very foundational. And I think I'm in a really good spot. I'm about 85% there for the game. Like it's already designed. I'm just tweaking cards, tweaking like some small interactions, things of that nature. But I think I've been there for a while now, and I've just been afraid to like put myself out there, or really take the next step for some of the reasons I previously mentioned. But when I started designing this game, I really had a couple of things that I wanted to accomplish, and the first of them was like simultaneous actions. I think that mechanism has become more popular probably the last year and a half, 2 years, but it's still something that intrigues me, right? How can you have 2 players to 5 players? How can you increase that player size, but not necessarily increase the time frame it takes to play that game? And the simultaneous action where you're not sitting around waiting for that long or hardly ever is something that's very interesting, because I think that's sometimes a challenge with games is if you have to wait turns, sometimes it takes you out of the game. Not to say that that's always the case, but I just think that mechanism is very interesting. So I knew that whatever I designed, I wanted some sort of simultaneous action. I also wanted it to be lightweight to medium weight-ish, right? So like if someone like showed up for a game night and I was like, hey, you never played games? No big deal. I'll get you up and running. That I could teach, or someone else who's familiar with the game could teach it and play it within 90 minutes, right? And you can just add a person on and no big deal. Might add a couple minutes onto the time, but no big deal. So that was another thing. And I think that kind of went hand in hand with a simultaneous action, right? The other thing that I really wanted to kind of push the framework or the mechanisms is I kind of talked about this, but I really enjoy resource gathering, putting workers down on the board, putting something on the board and getting something for that. That idea, is something that I just love. I love that idea of putting this thing down and getting a resource to do something else, to get an engine building, to get something like that. But I also like to roll a dice on occasion. And I thought, what if I had those two things merged together? Which I think there are a couple of games that probably do that. But what if those existed in a game and you could do one, you could do both, or you could do the other, right? I don't know if that made sense just now, but you could do one action, right? If I just wanted to gather resources, kind of get an engine going, I could do that. But if I wanted to just roll dice and kind of fight maybe like monster-ish type things, right? Compare strength based off of dice value, I could do that as well. But if I also wanted to do those two things, I could do that as well. And all those are viable ways to a way to win. So that, when I was designing the game, that was another aspect that I wanted to kind of figure out. And then I wanted some sort of unique player powers. At the start of the game, you get an ability and it's unique to everyone else's. And maybe there's also some sort of player board that's unique to you. Maybe the resources are different to allow you to do different things. And those were things that I was trying to figure out in my head. Well, how do you do that? How do you tie that to a theme? And the last thing, and this is really, I think, what kind of drove me to the theme that I chose. The last thing that I had is I wanted to have a smaller board that it was unique. Everyone had their own smaller board where you're putting workers on that board, but at a certain point you gather enough resources to move that worker to a larger, more board that's more, everyone can take actions on this larger board, right, at a certain point, if you're able to gather enough resources and move them to that larger board. And that was another design that I was like, how do I do that? And like theming wise, how does that work? And I ultimately came to the conclusion, what if you were living in the real world, doing the day-to-day thing, right? And that mechanism was you escaping the real world to go to a dream world, which would be that larger board where you could do more different, take different actions, but you couldn't come back. And so I toyed with that for a little bit. I was in the design phase, and I think I've got it down to a really good solid point. So like I said, I've had it probably about 85% for a bit now. So I've play tested this extensively. This game I have play tested with friends, family. I've probably played it 300 to 400 times. But more importantly, I've taken it to like a couple of conventions. I've also been a part of Break My Game. They're in my general area. They're like a board gaming community that you just show up and you play test games, you get feedback. It's great. They're great. So if you live like in the DC area, they have some other like groups as well throughout the country. And I think they might actually be international now. Great. Look them up. They might have something in your area if you're not familiar with them, but even just to go play test some games, which I've done as well. But so that's currently where I'm at. I've got a lot of good feedback. So I guess right now I'll just take a moment to talk about the game, what I've done up until this point. So this game is currently, I have a Kickstarter preview page up. I haven't touched it in probably about 6 months, but it is a preview page. I'll put a link in the description below. But if you're interested and you want to go check it out, just to kind of look at it, what I'll say is if you had the app, for whatever reason, when you click on it through the app or you search for it, it doesn't come up with, it doesn't provide the preview page. You actually have to go to the website. And then if you go like a website view, of Kickstarter, it'll actually show the actual page. I don't know why that is, but for whatever reason, that's the way it is. But what I did want to do, and I'll read you like the theming of the game, just so you kind of have an idea, and you can go to the Kickstarter page again if you're really interested in it. But so I'll kind of read the fluff, the background of the game, and then I'll also kind of read what the actual game is from like a components perspective. And then from there, if you wouldn't mind just sharing this video, if you saw it, if you liked it, if you're interested, if you're intrigued. But largely, I don't think very many people see this. If they do, that's great. But I mean, this is just, again, it'll be an experiment. It'll be a snapshot in time that someone maybe can come back to. But with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and read the fluff now. So, escaping reality. So the dreamt have been watching, waiting for their moment to help a select few that's chosen create a bond strong enough to leave all they've ever known behind, escaping reality for another life in the dream world. And essentially, that's me toying with that mechanism for taking a board that's you just work on. I call it the reality board. And then you moving them to the dream world. So what is Escaping Reality? So Escaping Reality is a competitive simultaneous action selection game for 1 to 5 players, in which players assume the role of the dreamt, competing to become the strongest avatar in the dream world by obtaining the most victory points. On this journey for conquest, players will leverage their dreamt's unique powers to acquire artifacts, obtain companions, defeat nightmares, complete objectives, and gather enough comfort to help the chosen fall asleep and enter the dream world forever. So that's just kind of some of the background, the fluff on it. In the next coming weeks, I'll have to figure it out, like what I'm going to do for the next video. But every week I plan on sharing what I've done up until that point. And again, I'll probably have some design diaries. I'll figure it out. I don't know. But hopefully this holds me accountable. New year, again, new me. And if you're inspired or you want to share any advice that you had, I'd be grateful to hear it. But thank you. Again, I'm Rico Sainer, and we'll see how this year plays out for me. Thanks for watching.